What's up, Notre Dame fans? Welcome into a new edition and episode of Irish Huddle with Mike Singer, Mike Goolsby, and Lou Somogyi. If you're watching us on YouTube, this is pretty cool. This is something new we're doing here. If you're just listening through Spotify or however you listen to your podcast, obviously that's not changed, but we added something a little bit new where I'm in Atlanta. Lou is just outside of South Bend, and Mike Goolsby's in Omaha, Nebraska. So we've got the whole Zoom thing. We're up with the times doing this. So if you're listening on Spotify and you want to, I don't know, that it's like you're in the room with us, then you can search us on YouTube, Blue and Gold Illustrated, and you should be able to find us no problem. Guys, how are we doing today?
Rainy days, but that's okay.
I'm healthy. Yeah, I'm healthy. All things considered, I've got nothing to complain about.
Well, we go ahead, Lou.
No, that's all it comes down to right now: health and just well-being.
Well, we've got. I think it's a topic no one's really going to be interested in, just quarterbacks. Oh yeah, people are interested in quarterbacks, right? So we're going to talk quarterbacks. We're going to start it off with Notre Dame 2021 quarterback commit Tyler Buchner from San Diego, California. Michael's really I'm interested to, because we haven't really talked much off camera about what you think about Buckner as a player, so I'm kind of amped up to hear your thoughts. You pop on Buckner's junior tape. What'd you think?
He fits that kind of mold, though, that template, we'll call it, that Kelly seems to go after and enjoy in his quarterbacks. Kind of that height, weight, speed, added agility. What is he listed at 6'2", 200 pounds? So not a towering 6'4", 6'5", kind of traditional stand in the pocket, sling the ball quarterback. The most impressive thing to me, Mike, watching him, he's a hell of an athlete. I mean, he could pass as a running back. If you just put on his clips with him, carrying the ball, he could pass for a legitimate running back. Like, he's got jump cuts that a lot of backs would be envious of. He likes to throw out of the pocket. And we've heard, Kelly say, I'm not going to say ad nauseum, but we've heard Kelly go back over and over where he wants to kind of refine Book. He wants to keep Book in the pocket and deliver. But then we're recruiting, an athletic quarterback that gives you kind of that dual threat element. I do think I like him in terms of being critical or things that the room for improvement, we'll call it. His throwing motion probably needs some work. He's an arm thrower. So, this is great that we're on Zoom. So, like modern day quarterbacks, like years ago, they used to teach a quarterback to step in and throw. That's why all these quarterbacks wear a knee brace on their left leg, right? So they kind of deliver the ball over the top off of their left, that kind of that plant foot. And nowadays, because the pocket's becoming more and more condensed, pass rushers are getting better and better and better. They're teaching quarterbacks to essentially stand flat-footed. And for all of our listeners and viewers that are golfers, they kind of teach them to snap that hip and throw the ball over. Everybody saw that. It turned into kind of a meme of Dak Prescott's pregame warm-up, where he's kind of going down the field, snapping that hip. At this point, in terms of Buckner's development, he doesn't do that. He's more of an arm thrower, so there's not a lot of hip snap. So with that, any negatives you're going to hear in terms of his arm strength can be addressed once he, again, refines that movement and brings his hips into it like a golfer, if you will. And then his delivery, he goes to throw the ball, he kind of brings it down and over, kind of a wind-up motion, which, you'd like to see that cleaned up. You can get a lot of backside pass rush where they can kind of swipe that ball, so that left tackle becomes more important. But all in all, the kid looks like a gamer. He seems to love the game. Again, he has that kind of moxie that Book, to me, really, really carries. And the last kind of note that I add on him, he looks the part. If you put him in a lineup, you'd say, yep, that's the quarterback. He's got good face. Like, you've heard Colin Cowherd talk about this. Like, he looks like a quarterback, great looking kid. you presume he's got some leadership abilities. I'm excited about him. Again, none of these kids are finished products, but there's a really, really good foundation to work with.
Do you like call?
Mike, it's interesting that you brought up the technique and the throwing motion, because that was exactly the issue the second that Phil Jakovic arrived on campus. I mean, he was a top 100 recruit, U.S. Army All-America, the whole. And the first day when he's out there at Culver, you could just see that the motion seemed to be just not coming naturally as much. So there was going to be a lot of debate about, do you mess with that? Do you just let him be who he is? And I asked Brian Kelly that question last August, and he says, we don't touch him. We just let him be who he is. Where is that fine line in coaching of refining that technique to also letting somebody just be who he is, because that's what got him where he is?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something, it's most definitely before his arrival at Notre Dame and during his downtime as a player at Notre Dame, that's when you want to work on that stuff. When it comes to practice, I mean, shoot, he's going to be drinking through a fire hose. He's got so much information to process, where inevitably he's going to revert back to what's natural and what's comfortable. So, address it now, work on it, where it becomes more natural and it becomes part of his, essentially muscle memory. But what's funny, you talk about Jurkovic and like, I can go back to Tebow, like Tim Tebow, arguably one of the best college football players ever. And going into the draft, his throwing motion was an issue. So in all of his workouts, he was cleaning up, he was making it tight. And I remember they even had because he had that wind up motion. And during his workout, they had a guy with a pad basically like restraining his motion. And then once he got to the league, he was right back to the wind up. So that's what, he ultimately, when his feet were held to the fire, he went back to what he's comfortable with. So I don't know if that's a good answer. I think it is something he should be cognizant of. And again, inch towards tightening things up, making that delivery quicker and more succinct.
Yeah, because it seemed almost at times to get into Phil's head. And after that blue goal game in 2019, he said, man, people have been trying to change my motion ever since high school or something. And it's like you said, once you start getting uncomfortable, then you revert back to what you feel most secure with.
Mm-hmm.
And when it starts getting into a quarterback's head, oh, am I following through on here? I think that's just going to affect the rest of his game. And I wonder sometimes whether that happened with Phil here.
I'll tell you, I was always on the defensive side of the ball. 2 stories with quarterbacks. One, when I was a freshman, fans will remember this, Matt LaVecchia was playing as a true freshman, right? We were both classmates. And I found myself post-practice watching tape of him. And again, you've got the wide copy from the press box, and you've got the tight copy from the end zone. And he was watching end zone footage of a game. And again, this is big-time football, right? There's pressure, but these are still kids. And there are so many people, and fans will, most fans, they'll never get a chance to see that tight copy. There are so many people flashing. And I was like, holy shit. I don't know how this kid, I was amazed because I was a freshman in college. I'd never seen tight copy football footage. So there's so much going on, and there's so much that those kids need to process that, yes, if you're in your head about your throwing motion, it's really going to delay things in your ability to pull the trigger. And then the second story, Jared Clark, who was another classmate of mine, one of 4 quarterbacks we signed back then, love him to death. He ended up playing tight end, could have been a linebacker. But when he was a freshman, I mean, Jared could throw the ball through a wall. I mean, he had a cannon, an absolute hose. But he was trying to process so much at practice that, like, sometimes his passes would just, like, sputter because he could never, step into it and throw because there was too much going on. He couldn't process that information. So, again, work on it now. And then even if you make a, 20% improvement, that's massive. And then when he gets in, then you've got to, take in the game plan and the real coaching, the X's and O's aspect.
Well, that's where somebody like a Tommy Reese, when he came here as a freshman in 2010, he did not come in with the accolades of like a classmate Andrew Hendricks, who had the much bigger arm. He was a 4-star prospect. But Tommy was able to process information so quickly and get the ball out of his hands so fast before defenses were able to react. That's what gave him the leg up. And it's those type of intangibles that sometimes doesn't show up always on the scouting report or, in the evaluations. And
Yeah. And
that's why he was able to do it.
And you go back to Tommy's background, in terms of like growing up around football.
Yeah.
And he's a really calm dude. He's calm, and probably doesn't get rattled. And it's a theme. These are like themes. Those coaches trust him. I mean, that's their livelihood at stake when that kid has that ball in his hand. Not an electric player, not a super dynamic player, but again, coaches trusted him. And again, it's one of those, kind of tagged phrases where he's a game manager, but sometimes that's what it takes.
Now, Mike, everyone does want that Trevor Lawrence or the Tua, just that, the quarterback who can maybe mask some deficiencies, although those two quarterbacks in those teams, championship teams they had, didn't have a ton of deficiencies. But, do you see Buckner as like a guy who could lead Notre Dame to a national championship? Does he kind of have some of those elite traits?
We'll see. I mean, I think, again, I really feel like Lou and I were just talking about with Tommy Rees, somebody's mental makeup is, to me, at that position at a program like a Notre Dame, playing in those big time games, those Clemson, those Georgia, those games, that mental makeup, while again, it's an intangible, Lou, and it really shouldn't be called an intangible, should it? But those factor in just as much as somebody's physical abilities. I mean, look at Jamarcus Russell. The guy could throw the ball 75 yards on his knees. And wow, what an arm talent. But maybe didn't have the mental makeup. So it is a bit of a balancing act. I like what I see. Again, the kid's got moxie. And you're just going to have to see when he gets to school, how he continues to develop and how the coaches handle him.
His stats were ungodly his junior season there, to the point, he had 81 total touchdowns, and that's basically even just playing a half of football. So there were tremendous questions called into play about the level of competition that he was going against. Now this year he's transferring to San Diego Helix, I believe, Mike.
Yes.
Reggie Bush's old school and all, where the competition level is going to be enhanced. Is that another area, Mike, that you see that's going to be pivotal to his development, is facing the level of competition where it just doesn't always go his way?
Sure. Yeah, it's the man amongst boys. So things are at a higher level of competition. Things are going to move faster. He's going to be playing against more elite talent. So yes, inevitably, that should ramp up, his progress as a player. But again, going back to like the competitiveness, the moxie, the character, we'll call it, just kind of encapsulate that. We'll call it character. If a kid's transferring to a program, and again, these are kids. So he's going into a new school as a senior to get better. I think that speaks volumes about the type of character he has and his willingness to continue to get better. That matters.
I think I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think even part of his transfer, I think, was even to help him enroll early at Notre Dame, because he wants to get to South Bend next January to compete as a freshman at Notre Dame. You look at the depth chart at Notre Dame for following this season. Your returning scholarship quarterbacks are Brendan Clark, Drew Pine, and Tyler Buchner. And assuming Book starts this entire season, you're not. It's going to be a pretty even quarterback room, because they all pretty much have the same experience. Like, of course, Clark will have been at Notre Dame 3 years, so he knows the how to be a college student athlete a lot better than Tyler will be. But if you're Tyler Buchner, you're coming into a situation, Lou, where you potentially could even start as a true freshman.
Well, especially coming in early. But, we had that early in Brian Kelly's career there in 2012. Gunnar Keel was a 5-star prospect. I think he was rated only behind Jameis Winston as the best quarterback prospect in the nation that year. And he was looking at Notre Dame's depth chart and saying, geez, Dane Christ has transferred. Tommy Rees, they're looking to upgrade from there, and nobody else has played. Well, lo and behold, Everett Golson, who was redshirted, he steps in as the starter, and all of a sudden Gunner is thinking he's going to be the starter the next 3 years. And then, Golson is suspended the next year, or, expelled for school for a semester. And maybe he looks back and say, I could have started there. But he's coming into a situation where there shouldn't be a tremendous gap between him and Brendan Clark, unless, let's say, something happens to Ian Book during the season, and then Brendan Clark or Drew Pine have to suddenly start 6, 7, 8 games, and now they have that volume of experience. So, all quarterbacks, especially those at the top-rated ones, they look at that depth chart and see, where can I come in and help right away. The guys like the Justin Fieldses and the Trevor Lawrence, they're not there to sit for a year or two.
Right.
They're there to come right in and be able to perform. And really, Tommy Rees in the Brian Kelly era was the only one kind of prepared to handle that. Even a Gunnar Keel, a Malik Zaire, Deshaun Kaiser, who became a second-round choice. Some of those were early entrants, but they were still not ready to play. And sometimes that's the question that's asked: is Notre Dame's system not friendly enough for younger quarterbacks to excel right away? What is your thought, Mike?
Well, I wanted, before I get to that, Lou, Mike, what you had said in terms of one of the factors behind him transferring is that he could enroll earlier. So
I don't want to I'm recording a podcast, so I'm on the record, but I believe it was probably going to be easier for him to do that at this other school. Yeah.
So if that's the case, potentially, if that's the case, again, I do think that adds on to what I'm talking about in terms of his character and his willingness to transfer, to develop, play a higher level of competition, add to the fact that it gets him enrolled earlier. Yeah. The flip side to that is that kid is all in. Like, I'm going here, I'm going to sit for a year. I'm going to get myself ramped up as quickly as I can. If it doesn't work out, right? If anybody else on the depth chart supersedes him and they get the nod as a starter, what do you do then? So that's a concern of mine when, because quarterbacks have egos, and they should. I think they need to. So if that bruises his ego, that he's not, doesn't become the step-in starter once Book moves on.
Yeah,
we don't want to lose him to a transfer situation. Lou, I forgot what you asked.
No, well, you just brought up a great point there. And once Phil transferred, whether it was in our magazine or our website, Lou, I know you wrote a column. It's like it was very predictable that Phil was going to transfer, because when you have a log jam at quarterback, someone's going to transfer because they want to play.
There have been since 1977, I've counted 24 quarterback transfers from Notre Dame, and that's not even including position switches, such as with Mike's classmates, Carlisle Holiday eventually moving to wide receiver, Jared Clark moving to tight end. We've seen a number of those as well, but you don't see many Kevin McDougals. I don't know if people remember that name. He waited 3 years behind Rick Meyer, but he stuck it out and started as a senior, even though Ron Paulus was advertised as the inevitable starter as a freshman before he got injured. And he set the career record for passing efficiency on a team that nearly won the national championship.
It's wild.
I don't think you see that anymore. Even with Trevor Lawrence, you had a Kelly Bryant who led them to the playoff, but you saw Dabo Swinney gradually integrating Trevor into the offense with some plays there to get him ready to go. And I don't know whether you can do that or if Brian Kelly wants to do that with a Tyler Buchner, if he's prepared for that.
Well, I think to do that, to kind of roll like they did, to sort of, again, groom him and start just incrementally developing Trevor Lawrence. It's funny, we keep referencing he and, Tua and Fields as sort of like gold standard of that. that prototypical elite quarterback of what you're looking for. But to roll in to Trevor Lawrence like they did versus Kelly Bryant, you got to trust the rest of your team, Lou. I really do. That's going to be a thing. But again, it's a psyche, and again, kind of working with young athletes like I do, that psyche is interesting. So sometimes, like if you go back to a Ron Paulus versus a Joe Montana, right? So Joe Montana is probably, the guy's a legend now, and you know the story, Lou. You probably wrote the story at some point. But wasn't he like a fourth string or fifth string or something like that? And then
he was fourth string on the JV team as a freshman and seventh string overall when he came in his freshman season.
So does that mean maybe he was a little short on ability and he just had the mental toughness to stick it out, and that's ultimately what made Joe Montana Joe Montana? I don't know. Like Tom Brady got demoted at Michigan, and maybe wasn't the most physically gifted kid in the world, but then look at what happened. So again, I think, and why wouldn't it be the case? People get enamored with physical abilities, arm strength, 40 times, you name it. But again, what's in a kid's heart, that sounds corny to even say it out loud, and it shouldn't, but what's in a kid's heart, and again, their mental toughness, their mental fortitude at that position, hell, especially with Brian Kelly going purple in the face, yelling at you, man, it takes a unique character at that position. So that's really we'll never know, because we're never going to be in those meetings. We're never going to be at, day in and day out of practice. But that to me, as much as anything, truly matters, specifically at that position.
But you know better, Mike, than anyone, having worked with young athletes today. In Joe Montana's time, my gosh, you didn't really – the only publicity was once they reported on campus, it's like, oh, okay, that's the freshman team over there. These quarterbacks now, from their freshman year on, and even eighth grade, they start going to these quarterback camps, the Super 11, the Elite 11, or whatever else. They have these quarterback coaches working with them from grade school on. Their technique, you had somebody like a Jimmy Clausen. He was like from sixth grade on starting to be groomed to be a college quarterback.
Yeah, he was in Sports Illustrated or ESPN as a seventh grader. I remember reading about him.
Yeah.
Well, some of those kids, and maybe like a Ron Paulus. And I always thought that about Carson Palmer. Like, I'm going to use two different words. Like, they're thrust into that role. Like, they're thrust into being elite. And maybe that kid isn't ready yet, emotionally mature, mentally mature. And then some kids are anointed. Like Carson Palmer, he was anointed when he got to SC. And I was like, he's not that good. And eventually he kind of came through but he had 4 years to become the guy. But he was anointed and he was given every opportunity to become the guy, and eventually won the Heisman. So what do you want, folks? Do you want a kid that's going to come in as a freshman and you got to take the lumps and stick with them, coaches included? Or do you want a kid that's just a freak? He plays like a 28-year-old at 19. What do we want?
And the transfers more and more. I mean, look at last year. Joe Burrow transferred from Ohio State. Justin Fields transferred from Georgia because he saw he wasn't going to play ahead of Jake Fromm. Jalen Hurts helped lead a national title. He's not going to play ahead of Tua, so he goes to Oklahoma. There are quarterbacks all over the country right now probably saying, you know what, that could be me. And I think especially looking at Joe Burrow, because that was a 3-star prospect.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that everyone will be, because for every Joe Burrow you hear, there's going to be 5, 6, 10 guys who don't even come near that or even start at a school. But I think that mentality takes over more and more, seeing the success that they had with either a different location or, in Joe Burrow's case, also a different coach coming in from New Orleans.
I mean, again, as much as we run with our quarterbacks and their design runs, it's not a sporadic, spontaneous kind of takeoff play downfield. Guys get nicked up. So it's like, okay, I know you're not the starter day one, but all it's going to take is one twisted ankle. We've seen these things, right? And then, boom, now you're the guy. So you're committing, and that's where it's a balance, right? I mean, you're committing to the university. You're committing to these coaches. You're committing to these future teammates. You're going to Notre Dame. So there's a back and a forth. It's not that Notre Dame's here to serve you. You're here to serve Notre Dame as well. And I think, people need to realize that, and kids need to kind of hang on to that too. It's not just you're looking at the depth chart and okay, this is where I'm going based off of my projected future. You committed to the school, you committed to the coaches, you committed to the teams, to your teammates. And that again, it's something that we've created this monster. Lou, I blame the two of you. We created this monster.
Listen, I cringe. I've learned to cringe with Ron Paulus and with Jimmy Clausen. When Ron Paulus is already after one game described as he'll win not one but 2 Heismans. When Jimmy Clausen, before he even enters college, is described as the LeBron James of college football, I said, this poor kid has no matter what he achieves, it's never going to be enough. It's always going to be, well, he's not that. It's like if I'm telling you, Mike, I got the world's funniest joke in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
You might, chuckle a little bit, but you're saying it's not that funny.
No, you're right. You're right. So again, like Mike, you kind of opened up this conversation. Is Tyler Buchner a national championship quarterback? And it's like next podcast though, like call what's her name, like Sister Cleo or whatever, that psychic, like get a psychic on here.
There you go.
Maybe that's the move. Miss Cleo. Sorry.
I want to step on a soapbox here for a second. When we're talking about the mental fortitude and you set up all these high expectations, I want to talk about Drew Pine, because here we are, having a podcast about quarterbacks and a lot about Buckner. But once really Buckner committed, and then his junior tape starts to come out, and he's just putting up these crazy numbers. And then Drew Pine, it's his senior season. He leads his team to a 21-3 win, 16 of these are just kind of generalized stats here. 16-27, 180 yards, no touchdowns. People look at Buckner's stats. Well, he scored 5 touchdowns in the first quarter, and so people have already moved on to Buckner. But Pine, part of 2 state title teams, when he went into his freshman year, and he won a state title as a true freshman quarterback in New Canaan, storied program. He was someone who had offers from Nick Saban in Alabama before he even played freshman as a freshman in high school. Jimbo Fisher was Florida State's head coach at the time and offered him there. The expectations Pine had throughout high school, and then as he's getting into his junior and senior year, he's still right around 5'11", 6 foot, so he hasn't grown a ton. So people have doubted Drew Pine. And here we are talking about Buckner and not even spending a lot of time on Pine, someone who was ranked number 37 in the country and in his class in 2020 in early rankings. Then he just ended up falling, and he ended up at 117 on Rivals, which is much higher than every other site had him at. So just talk about someone who's, man, he's got some stones. Like Drew Pine is someone who he's not the biggest. He doesn't have the strongest arm. He didn't play against strong competition. In the Under Armour All-America game this January, I think he looked like the best quarterback, though. The dude is just a gamer. Any follow-up thoughts on Drew Pine? I've been able to see him twice. Once at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge, which just had elite dudes. I spent an entire week in Orlando watching him for that Under Armour All-America game practices. He don't look the part in terms of being some big, strong, tall quarterback who's super mobile, but dude's just a gamer.
So how tall is he now, Mike?
I think Notre Dame, I've seen a couple of them, what they list him at. It's either
he's listed at 5'11" and 5'8". No, he's listed at 5'11" and a half, 194.
There you go.
So, again, not your generic guy, but again, it fits Brian Kelly's mold. But yeah, guys that have chips on their shoulder tend to do well, not only in football, but sometimes in life. I mean, if he carries that chip with him, and what people got to understand, I'll never forget, I watched a clip one time. Like it was Brian Kelly at practice, and whoever the quarterback was, it was on a run play. And the 3 technique was lined up one side, and on this particular run play, they're supposed to check away. It was actually the nose. They're supposed to check away from the nose. And you would have thought, Brian, like you would have thought the kid threw an interception on a screen pass in a national championship game, the way Brian Kelly jumped on this kid's throat. And so I guess my takeaway from that was like, these poor kids, and I'm not saying poor, but they're quarterbacks, right? They get the girls and everything else. But these poor kids have to know so much. And again, you chip on your shoulder. So that chip on your shoulder to sit there and like, well, it's 8:30 at night. Am I going to jump on and play Fortnite for the next 2 hours? Or am I going to get my playbook? And, these kids have iPads now and whatever else. So that chip on your shoulder in terms of before you ever get to practice, before you ever do any of your prep work, and we've all seen Tom Brady at home watching film, you almost have to become obsessive about it. If that kid's obsessive about winning, it's going to serve him well. And then the flip side of that is too, and I lived this, I was a, blue chip recruit, right? It goes to your head sometimes. I mean, if you're a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, and you might lose a little bit of that chip that might have got you to that place in the first place. So if Pine never got that sort of adulation earlier on in his career, he's probably still, edgier. Does that make sense? And that could really serve him well at that position. So I'm not writing anybody off.
Yeah.
That's why we practice. That's why they have competition. We shouldn't be anointing people before they've even played their senior year of high school.
Yeah. I mean, this kid's an 8th grader and he was anointed as the next best thing we're talking 17, 18-year-olds being anointed as this. Here he is, 8th grade. It's crazy. We got to read a quick ad here from our sponsors at Augie's Locker Room. Are you looking for that unique Notre Dame item for the Fighting Irish fan in your life? Visit Augie's Locker Room, the country's #1 Notre Dame memorabilia shop. They have the largest selection of Notre Dame helmets dating all the way back to the turn of the century up to the present day, including the Shamrock Series helmet. They also have stadium benches, framed tickets, one-of-a-kind Rockney items, signed items, and many other unique pieces. If it's Notre Dame, they have what you're looking for. Visit them online at augieslockerroom.com or call 574-277-ND. That's augieslockerroom.com. So, Mike, when we're talking about Tyler Buchner, does he have the elite tools and all this stuff? Every analyst would have their answer. I loved yours, though, of, dude, I don't know. I mean, we've got a lot to see. With Ian Book, though, we've got a season and a half or so of him as a starting quarterback at Notre Dame. So we talk about Book, 5th-year senior quarterback at Notre Dame, 3rd season as a starter. Is he a national championship level quarterback? Can he lead Notre Dame to the promised land?
I'd like to think so. And I've told my buddies, in text messages and everything else, I think he's going to be a 1st-round pick. I truly believe that.
Whoa!
I truly believe that. I'm
Whoa.
on record. I do. I again, he's got. And think about your modern day quarterbacks like Kyler Murray's 5'8", 5'9", Baker Mayfield, etc. Tua is not a huge person, so you can kind of take that measurable that again traditional sort of generic quarterback. You can kind of put that to the side with modern day football. He's got escapability. The thing that to me that Book needs to do, and Brian Kelly can help him with this, is you're the man. You're the man, right? Nobody's breathing down your neck. Calm the hell down. Calm down. You're a fantastic player. He just has to calm down. He gets those happy feet. And, I've answered some questions on the message board, how would you grade the offensive line, et cetera. We're not pointing fingers at the offensive line. If and I'm not going to say he's nervous, but it's almost like he's anxious back there. So if he's anxious and he's not delivering, he's got happy feet back there, it makes the line look more porous than it actually is.
Saying it's a team game? Really?
It is, yeah.
People forget that. People really do forget that.
And everybody wants to point the arrow. I mean, it's human nature. And again, like I talked about with coaches tape, with the end zone copy, we don't know who's open. We can't see it on the television broadcast. I love Ian Book. I'm a huge supporter of his. He needs to calm down. But I do think, and there might be some of this coming, where he's moving outside of the pocket a little bit more, because that's inherently, we talk about going back to throwing motions and where these players are comfortable. He's more comfortable, to me, a little bit on the move, and that takes advantage of that kind of dual threat. So Kelly likes to have design runs. So why can't we move Book outside of the pocket on some sort of a boot action? And if it's not there, he pulls it down and picks up 8 yards. There's nothing wrong with that. That is modern day college football, big time. That's what we're seeing. So I don't know if that's a cohesive statement even. It's like you put a quarter in me and wind me up, but he needs to calm down. I do think we need to move him out of the pocket a little bit, give him a read or two, and if it's not there, he can pull it down and get down for 6 yards. I,
It's an extremely small sample size with Tommy Rees as the coordinator in the bowl game. Now, he also probably, as the season wore on and Chip Long was gradually getting phased out and Tommy Rees was having more input, he was experiencing success in that month of November and in the bowl game. Did you notice anything in those games, that 6-game winning streaks to end the season? And granted, the competition wasn't the best. Any changes from Rees's direction in how Book was functioning in the offense?
I think it's more that success to me, just knowing a little bit about football. The teams you're competing against, they don't have a book on Rees's probabilities. You understand? So they can't go back and watch 2 seasons of play calls. And this is what on 3rd and 8, they like to do this out of this formation. It's wide open. So that's probably the biggest contributing factor to that success. So now that'll be the challenge. So those two have had a chance to gel in terms of their relationship, but now there is a little bit of a, no pun intended, there's a book on Book now that these coaches have. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays itself out.
Ooh, man, quarterback talk is fun.
Yeah, it's a lot. Again, I just I love that we're looking for that, but we got to be there. Like you said, Mike, it's a team game. I wish I could. That's something. Sometimes you can, like, again, going back to that Georgia game, and that first 2 series, like, Book made some incredible plays, and one time a ball was dropped, and we had a nice screen play to Tony Jones, and like he got tripped by the shoelace, and hell, he could have scored on that. And that would have been a 60-yard touchdown pass from Book, right?
Sure.
So there's all these little things when you go back over games with a fine-tooth comb. Nothing, and I learned this as a player, nothing's as good as it ever seems, and nothing's as bad as it ever seems.
Always somewhere in the middle.
It's always somewhere in the middle, and you're like, man, I had a hell of a game. I was killing it. And you're like, yep, could have made that play, could have made that play. I played like crap, and then it wasn't as bad as you thought either. So,
I have a feeling, Mike, that it's going to be a huge conversation piece on cyberspace regarding your statement about Book having the ability or potential to be a first-round pick.
Why not?
If you look at Kyler,
you may be answering that in chat sessions here coming up.
Kyler Murray came out of nowhere. I mean, Baker, I want to say, a lot of these quarterbacks just kind of come out of nowhere and win a national championship. I'm sorry, not national championship, the Heisman. I feel like Robert Griffin III. It's just like all of a sudden, even during that season, he won the Heisman. He came out of nowhere in the middle of the season. So,
But again, you tell me. So if you put Book on Clemson's team, or you put Book on LSU's team with all these receivers, like, just think about it. So could he be a first-round pick in that scenario with those just elite freak athletes out there on the edges? Yes or no?
Those guys helped Burrow get drafted first for sure.
That's what I'm saying. So again, if I'm drafting a kid, it's inevitably he's going to go to if you're drafting a quarterback in the first round, he's not going to go to a great team. But I do believe that. It'll be a topic on the interwebs, Lou. It's been a topic on my I've got some money hanging out there with some bets I've made with some college football buddies. So
but another part of that is that we just talked about, Clemson, Trevor Lawrence had the Justin Rosses, etc., and then Joe Burrow, the receivers he has, and 2 of the receivers he has, like 4 first-rounders at receiver during his career. You look at Notre Dame's roster right now, and there's not that alpha figure at the receiver position. The guy
just
with
lost it.
Career receptions coming back is Lawrence Keys with 13. Now, Tommy Tremble at tight end has 16. And there's also not that running game right now where you say, okay, that can take some of the onus off of Ian Book. So he's going to have to do probably more of the heavy lifting as opposed to, inheriting something like Joe Burrow did, where you have a lot of star power and proven experience at the receiver or even running back position. So that might make it a little bit more difficult for him.
We'll have to wait and see. I think I have an idea what that offense might look like next year, and I just I'm really excited. And again, like we're talking about Fields, right? So Justin Fields has the potential to be the first or second or third pick of this year's draft, right? We all agree, right?
Yeah.
Top 5, top 10 pick, worst case scenario. So he wasn't good enough to beat out Jake Fromm. You know what I'm saying? So he transferred. And what round did Jake Fromm go in? Yeah, I stopped watching after like the third or fourth round.
Well, that's when people blame Kirby Smart.
So again, the grass isn't always greener. I'm a fan of Book. We would all do well to rally around Book. And he's the guy. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen. I really do.
I think that's going to do it for this episode of Irish Huddle. Man, this was some good conversation. And you guys will just have to keep coming back. And whether you're watching us on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts, of course, all of these are posted at blueandgold.com as well. We appreciate you guys for listening. Make sure to go to blueandgold.com, use promo code Irish60, which will get you 60 days free at blueandgold.com. All of our premium recruiting information, everything that's going on in the team, and thousands of Notre Dame fans who are very interesting. I got to get back to our message board here and see what trouble they've stirred up as we've been recording. So that's going to do it for this episode of Irish Huddle.